Earth had fallen silent long before the last signal faded. The sky was no longer a canvas of promise, or even threat. It simply ceased to matter. Nations that once stood on the bones of empires crumbled under the weight of their ambitions, collapsing into a mire of forgotten ideologies. The oceans choked on the waste of centuries, and the air, thick with the dust of decay, became another boundary between what was and what remained. It wasn't war or famine that brought the end. It was time, relentless and indifferent. Some believed humanity's story should have ended there, with a whimper rather than a bang. But when all that was left of a civilization was a faint flicker of survival, the human race, stubborn as ever, clung to that flicker. Exploratory missions, desperate, poorly planned, and underfunded, were launched into the unknown. One after the other, they vanished, slipping away into the cold expanse, carrying with them the last hopes of those who still dared to dream. But hope was never the only thing out there. Dr. Amelia Vance knew this. She had once been among those dreamers, idealists who looked to the stars not with desperation, but with belief. Now, though, she harbored no such illusions. Her fingers tapped absently against the metal hull of their ship as she stared out into the emptiness, her eyes tracing lines that led nowhere. "This isn't about hope," she muttered under her breath, though there was no one around to hear her. "It's survival, stripped of the pretense." The ship's dull hum filled the silence, its ancient technology groaning as it pushed toward an unnamed planet in an equally forgotten sector of space. It was the last place anyone would look for answers, precisely why it had been chosen. Vance had led this mission not because she believed in it, but because there was nothing left for her back on Earth. There wasn't much left anywhere. Behind her, the others sat in uneasy silence. Captain Elias Dreyfus, a man whose sunken eyes told more than his words ever could, piloted the ship with the care of someone who'd lost too much to risk losing anything else. His family had been among the last to succumb to the chaos on Earth, and yet, somehow, he continued to press on, as though the next mission might offer some kind of redemption. He'd never said as much, but Vance knew. Everyone had their own ghosts. Rhys sat in the back, his gaze fixed on his weapon, which he disassembled and reassembled with the same precision he applied to everything else. He wasn't an idealist, a believer, or even a cynic. He was a soldier, a man who survived because it was the only thing left he knew how to do. Vance had asked him once what kept him going, and he had responded with a shrug. It wasn't indifference. It was simply that nothing else mattered enough to stop. And then there was Mira, the quietest of them all. She was the youngest by a few years, but her eyes carried a weight that far outstripped her age. She often stood at the edge of the group, as though the world she inhabited was slightly different from everyone else's. It was hard to tell what motivated her, a need to prove herself, or perhaps something deeper that even she couldn't quite name. Whatever it was, she carried it silently, the same way she carried her technical equipment, always ready but never speaking unless spoken to. The mission itself was vague, as they always were. Officially, they were sent to investigate a series of faint signals originating from the planet ahead. Unofficially, it was another shot in the dark. The planet had no name, no history. It was just one of the thousands of cold, forgotten rocks scattered across the galaxy. But the signal had intrigued someone high enough in what remained of Earth's leadership to send them out here. As they neared the planet, Vance felt the weight of its presence long before they entered orbit. It wasn't an imposing sight, no grand spectacle, no menacing atmosphere. Just a barren, rocky surface with the occasional glint of light reflecting off its jagged features. And yet, something about it felt different. Not alive, not hostile, just waiting. The ship's automated systems kicked in, setting them on a controlled descent. They had all done this before, and yet the silence was different this time. Dreyfus, usually the first to break the tension, remained wordless as he guided the ship to its landing. There was no reason to say anything. They were here, and now it was time to find out why. The door hissed open, revealing the planet's bleak surface. Vance was the first to step out, her boots crunching against the rocky ground. The air was thin, but breathable. She glanced around, her eyes scanning the horizon. There was nothing, just miles and miles of jagged rock, stretching toward an equally barren sky. Rhys stepped out next, weapon in hand. He wasn't expecting trouble, but he never expected peace either. Sing followed, her equipment slung over her shoulder, her eyes already scanning the readings on her tablet. Dreyfus came last, his gaze lingering on the ship for a moment before he turned to join them. "What now?" Rhys asked, his voice as flat as the landscape around them. Vance didn't answer immediately. She didn't need to. There was only one direction to go, and it wasn't back. They walked for what felt like hours, the crunch of their boots the only sound in the oppressive silence. There was no wind, no life, no indication that this planet had ever been anything more than a forgotten corner of the galaxy. But the signal had come from somewhere, and Vance wasn't about to turn back empty-handed. It wasn't until they reached the ridge that they saw it. At first, it looked like just another rock formation, indistinct from the rest of the landscape. But as they drew closer, the shapes became clearer, too clear. The structure, half buried in the ground, was massive, ancient, and unmistakably unnatural. It rose from the earth like the bones of some forgotten beast, its dark surface weathered but intact. "This is it," Sing whispered, her voice barely audible over the sound of her own breath. She was already scanning the structure, her hands moving across her tablet as she tried to make sense of what she was seeing. Vance stepped forward, her fingers brushing against the cold, smooth surface of the structure. It didn't feel alien, not in the way she had imagined. It felt familiar, as though it had always been here, waiting for someone to find it. "What do you think it is?" Dreyfus asked, his voice carrying the weight of a man who had seen too much to be surprised by anything anymore. Vance didn't answer right away. She couldn't. There was no explanation that made sense, not yet. But as she stood there, her hand resting against the ancient structure, she felt something. Not fear, not awe, just a quiet certainty. The entrance to the alien structure loomed in front of them like the gaping maw of some ancient beast. It wasn't grand or imposing, but there was an undeniable presence about it, as though the weight of ages pressed down from every angle. Vance couldn't help but feel the sharp contrast between the barrenness of the planet and this hidden, dormant relic, like a forgotten whisper amidst a cacophony of silence. The air inside was stale, undisturbed for countless years. Their footsteps echoed through the narrow passageway as they ventured deeper, casting long shadows on the smooth, curved walls. The walls themselves were not stone or metal, at least not as far as they could tell. Whatever material made up this structure had aged without decay, its dark surface gleaming under the beams of their lights like polished glass. Yet it absorbed the light in a way that made the edges indistinct. The corridors twisted and turned with no discernible pattern, as if the structure had been built with no regard for logic or order. Mira's eyes were wide as she studied the inscriptions carved into the wall's intricate, spiraling symbols that seemed to defy any conventional understanding of language. They spiraled out from larger, central icons, radiating with a meticulous complexity that seemed deliberate, but utterly alien. Her hands hovered over the surface, the scanner in her grip flickering in and out of focus, unable to latch onto any readable data. "It's not picking up anything," she murmured, her voice barely audible in the dense air. She glanced back at Vance, eyes full of uncertainty. Vance took a step forward, her gaze tracing the lines etched into the surface. "It's old," she said quietly, "older than anything we've encountered." "Old doesn't mean useful," Dreyfus grunted from behind, his voice laced with frustration. His hand rested on his sidearm, though there had been no signs of danger so far. "We're chasing ghosts. Amelia, you think some ancient carvings are going to help us get back to Earth? Help us survive?" She turned sharply, meeting his eyes. "What do you expect to find, Elias? A beacon flashing salvation? This isn't about quick answers. You don't send a crew out to a forgotten planet and expect immediate results." Dreyfus narrowed his eyes. "You don't send them on suicide missions either. We should be looking for resources, supplies, things we can use, not wandering through some alien ruin on a hunch." Rhys had remained quiet, standing a few paces back, his eyes scanning the walls, though his focus seemed elsewhere. The structure itself, with its strange angles and impossible geometry, seemed to unsettle him in ways the others hadn't noticed. There was a coldness to the place, not just physically, but in the way it seemed to gnaw at the edges of the mind. He could feel it creeping in, pressing against the memories he had worked so hard to bury. His fingers twitched, gripping his rifle tighter. Mira, her gaze flitting nervously between Vance and Dreyfus, tried to speak but hesitated. She had studied countless alien scripts in her short career, none of which ever fully prepared her for something like this. The symbols seemed to writhe beneath her eyes, shifting imperceptibly, as though they were alive with some long-buried energy, waiting to be unleashed. But she couldn't show her hesitation. Not now. "We need to document everything," she said, her voice more steady than she felt. "This place, whatever it is, it was important once. We should." "Document it? For who?" Dreyfus cut in, his frustration boiling over. "Earth's falling apart, Mira. There won't be anyone left to read your reports by the time we make it back." She bit her lip, falling silent, her earlier determination faltering. Vance sighed, rubbing her temple as she turned back toward the inscriptions. "Maybe he's right," she muttered under her breath, though she wouldn't admit it aloud. But something about this place gnawed at her, to an elusive, unsettling truth hidden just beneath the surface, waiting to be uncovered. As they pressed further into the structure, the air grew colder, and the symbols on the walls became more elaborate, more cryptic. They passed through vast chambers filled with towering columns, each engraved with the same alien script, and narrow hallways where the walls seemed to close in, making it difficult to breathe. Yet there was no clear path, no indication of where they were meant to go, or what they were meant to find. Vance had studied enough dead civilizations to know that most of what they left behind had no meaning, at least not in the practical sense. Statues, murals, monuments, tributes to long-forgotten rulers or gods. But this place felt different. There was no grandeur, no sense of reverence. It was cold, clinical, and yet meticulously crafted. It wasn't a temple, a palace, or a tomb. It was something else. "Look at this," Rhys's voice broke the silence, his tone hard to read. He was standing at the entrance to another chamber, this one larger than any they had encountered so far. The walls were lined with long, narrow consoles, or what appeared to be console slabs of the same smooth material as the rest of the structure, dotted with small, faintly glowing symbols. At the center of the room, a single, massive structure rose from the floor, resembling an obelisk, though its surface was covered with the same alien inscriptions that lined the walls. Vance approached cautiously, her eyes darting between the consoles and the obelisk. "It's a control room," she murmured, though she couldn't be sure. The consoles didn't resemble anything she'd seen before, but their arrangement, the way they were positioned around the central structure, suggested some form of functionality. "What do you think it does?" Mira asked, her voice laced with both curiosity and fear. "Does it matter?" Dreyfus replied, his hand still resting on his weapon. "If we start messing with this, we could set off something we can't control." Vance ignored him, her attention drawn to the obelisk. She placed her hand on its surface, feeling the strange warmth radiating from it, despite the cold air around them. The symbols on the obelisk flickered, as if responding to her touch. Rhys shifted uneasily behind her, his grip tightening on his rifle. His mind was already racing, the alien environment triggering something deep inside him, something he had tried to bury for years. He could feel the walls closing in, the darkness pressing against his skin. The structure wasn't just cold, it was hostile, in a way he couldn't explain. He swallowed hard, his breathing becoming shallow. He had been through worse. He had survived worse. But this was different. The silence, the emptiness, it felt wrong. Like something was watching them, waiting for them to make a mistake. Vance ran her fingers along the glowing symbols, her mind racing with questions. What was this place? What had it been used for? And why had it been abandoned? "Are we sure we want to activate this thing?" Dreyfus's voice was steady, but there was an edge to it, a warning. "We're here to find out," Vance said without turning. Her fingers hovered over a set of symbols, almost as if they were guiding her. "You don't know what you're doing," Dreyfus insisted. You could set off a chain reaction, destroy the whole planet, maybe worse. Vance finally looked up, meeting his gaze. That's a risk we take every time we leave Earth. Without waiting for a response, she pressed down on the symbols. For a moment, nothing happened. The air was still, thick with tension. Then, slowly, the symbols began to pulse, glowing brighter with each passing second. The consoles around the room flickered to life, casting eerie shadows across the chamber. The obelisk, too, began to hum, a low, vibrating sound that reverberated through the walls. Mira took a step back, her eyes wide with both fear and awe. What did you do?" Vance didn't answer. She was staring at the obelisk, her mind racing. There was something here, something buried deep within this structure, an answer, perhaps, or a question that had yet to be asked. Either way, they had set something in motion. And now there was no turning back. The corridors stretched further than any of them had anticipated, as if the structure itself warped and elongated the deeper they ventured. Each turn seemed to promise the end of their search, but instead led them to another chamber, another set of hallways that diverged and converged like veins feeding into the unknown. The low hum of the activated consoles echoed in their minds, and there was a strange sensation that the walls themselves were watching, listening, perhaps even waiting. Vance's steps were quick, her attention completely absorbed by the cryptic carvings and the glowing consoles they passed. She couldn't tear her eyes away from the intricate symbols, now lighting up sporadically as they walked. Her thoughts swirled, the rhythm of the symbols drawing her deeper into a mental labyrinth. If there was a pattern here, she hadn't found it yet, but something told her that the answer was within reach. She just had to keep going. "We should stop," Rhys muttered, his voice tight, almost strained. His hand never left his weapon, and his eyes darted around with every noise, every flicker of light. "There's something off about this place. The further we go, the worse it feels." Vance didn't respond. She didn't need to. She hadn't felt like herself in hours, her mind drifting, almost hypnotized by the lure of this place. She knew what Rhys was feeling. She could feel it too. But that sensation was secondary to the pull that had consumed her. It was as though something was drawing her forward, beckoning her into the depths of the structure. The carvings, the glowing lights, they were all threads leading to a greater truth. She couldn't stop now. Dreyfus shot Rhys a glance. "Stay focused," he said flatly. "If this place was dangerous, we'd know by now." Mira was quiet, trailing behind them as her fingers worked furiously on her tablet, trying to make sense of the data pouring in from the consoles. It was a flood of information, too much to process at once, but she couldn't stop. The language, it was forming patterns, not random, not meaningless, and as she glanced up at the carvings again, something clicked. "It's a memory," she said quietly, more to herself than the others. Vance slowed her pace, hearing Mira's words. "What do you mean?" Mira looked up, her fingers freezing over the tablet. She gestured to the walls, to the symbols that seemed to shift and pulse with every step they took. "These inscriptions, they're not just carvings, they're recordings. Every time we interact with the structure, the symbols light up because they're responding to us. They're like fragments of a larger message, a story." Dreyfus frowned, stepping closer to the wall. "A story? From who?" "Not from anyone alive," Mira whispered, her eyes scanning the walls. "Whoever built this place, they're long gone. But this is what they left behind. It's like a message in a bottle. They wanted someone to find this." Rhys let out a low breath, his grip on his weapon tightening. "This doesn't feel like a message. It feels like a warning." Vance ignored the tension in his voice. She stepped closer to the nearest console, her eyes tracing the glowing inscriptions. If these were indeed fragments of a memory, then they had only scratched the surface. "We need to know more," she said softly, her fingers grazing the console. "We have to see it." She pressed down on a sequence of symbols, her movements confident, almost instinctive. For a moment, the room was still. Then the walls began to vibrate, softly at first, but growing stronger with each passing second. The light from the consoles pulsed, then dimmed, casting long shadows across the floor. Mira's eyes widened. "Vance, what did you Before she could finish, the chamber was bathed in a pale, cold light, and a series of figures flickered into view. They were ghostly, translucent forms, humanoid but distorted, their bodies wrapped in robes that seemed to flow like liquid. The alien beings hovered in silence, their features obscured by the shimmering light. The air was thick with tension as the team watched in stunned silence. These beings, whoever they were, had been here once. They had walked these halls, touched these walls, and now they were nothing more than echoes, fragmented memories left behind in the hopes that someone, someday, would understand. Mira swallowed hard, her gaze locked on the figures. "We triggered a recording." Vance didn't move. Her eyes were fixed on the figures as they shifted, their movements slow, deliberate, but without sound. They were communicating, though their language was incomprehensible, a series of gestures and flickering lights that meant nothing to the human mind. But as Vance watched, something strange began to happen. The figures blurred, their forms shifting, as if they were struggling to hold onto their shape. And then, fragments of meaning began to slip through. Words, broken and scattered, but words nonetheless. End of the cycle. Not meant to be found. Destroyed before it can awaken. Vance's breath caught in her throat. She glanced at Mira, who was furiously typing on her tablet, trying to capture everything, but it was impossible. The message was disjointed, fragmented like a puzzle with too many missing pieces. Rhys took a step back, his face pale. "We need to go. Now." Dreyfus remained still, his eyes scanning the room. "What is it trying to say?" Vance shook her head. "I don't know, but whatever this place was, it was meant to stay hidden." Mira's voice was shaky as she spoke. "This isn't a warning for us, it's a warning for them." "For who?" Rhys demanded. Vance hesitated. "Whoever finds this place next." Dreyfus took a deep breath, his mind racing. "We've gone too far. We shouldn't have activated anything." "You don't understand," Vance snapped, her frustration boiling over. "This structure, this entire place, it's trying to tell us something. We have to figure out what it is." Rhys shook his head, his voice filled with disbelief. "And what if it's something we can't handle?" Vance turned away from him, her fingers tracing the edge of the console. She couldn't let this go. The symbols, the recordings, they were fragments of a larger truth. A truth she was desperate to uncover. She had to know what had happened here, what had driven this civilization to leave behind only echoes. "Vance," Mira said softly, "this is dangerous. We don't know what we're dealing with." "I know," Vance replied, her voice quiet but firm. "But we have to keep going." Dreyfus stepped forward, his hand resting on her shoulder. "And what if we don't find the answers we're looking for? What if this place was meant to stay forgotten?" Vance looked up at him, her eyes filled with a determination that bordered on obsession. "Then we'll make sure it stays that way." For a moment, no one spoke. The air was thick with tension, the weight of their decision hanging over them like a storm cloud. Rhys's face was pale, his hands trembling slightly as he fought to keep his composure. Mira's eyes were wide, her breathing shallow, her fingers still hovering over her tablet, ready to capture whatever fragments of knowledge they could find. And Vance was already moving forward, her mind racing with questions, her body driven by a single, burning desire to uncover the truth. There was no turning back now, not for any of them. The temperature seemed to drop the further they ventured, though there was no rational explanation for it. The structure hummed with a silent energy, the walls almost breathing as they passed. No one spoke for some time. Vance led the way, her eyes scanning the surroundings for the next fragment of the puzzle. It had begun to dawn on the team that what they had stumbled upon wasn't merely an abandoned alien ruin. It was something far older, far more significant. Captain Dreyfus walked a few steps behind, his hand resting lightly on his sidearm, though it was clear to everyone that such weapons felt insignificant in a place like this. The unseen weight of the structure bore down on them all, a reminder that they were trespassers in a world whose secrets were never meant for them. Rhys moved with more hesitation than before. His usual calm had been eroded by the strange atmosphere of this place. It wasn't just fear, it was something more primal, a gnawing sense of being out of his depth. Mira, walking next to him, was unusually silent. She had proven her value in navigating the technology, but there was an unease about her now, a realization that her technical prowess might not be enough to survive what was ahead. The silence was finally broken by Dreyfus, his voice low, almost a growl. "We need a plan, Vance. This isn't going to end well if we keep moving like this, blind and reckless." Vance barely turned her head, her focus still locked on the alien inscriptions. She didn't respond immediately, her mind running faster than she could process the captain's words. The truth, or at least the key to it, felt so close. Every new piece of the puzzle brought with it a deeper understanding, though it also seemed to bring them further from any sense of control. "I understand your caution, Captain," she said finally, her voice distant. "But we're on the brink of something. I can feel it." Dreyfus stopped walking and reached out, grabbing her by the shoulder, forcing her to stop as well. "That's the problem," he said firmly. "You're feeling too much. You're obsessed. This isn't just some academic curiosity anymore. We're walking a fine line between discovery and destruction." Vance turned to face him fully, her eyes narrowing. "You don't get it, Dreyfus. We're not just here to explore a ruin. This is beyond anything we could have imagined. We're unlocking a part of history, a part of the universe itself." Dreyfus's gaze hardened. "And what happens when that key opens a door we can't close?" There was a tense pause as the words hung between them. For a moment, the rest of the team watched, unsure whether Vance would pull away and continue forward without them, or if she would finally concede that this path was growing too dangerous. Rhys cleared his throat, breaking the silence. "There's more at stake here than we realize. We need to be smart about this. Maybe?" He hesitated, unsure if his words would hold weight. "Maybe we should retreat, regroup, and figure out what we're really dealing with." Vance shook her head. "There's no time. Whatever this place was meant to protect, it's been waiting for someone like us to find it. If we stop now, we'll lose everything." Mira, who had been quiet for much of the conversation, spoke up. "But what if we're not the ones meant to unlock it? What if we're just waking something up?" Her words resonated in the space between them, the weight of the question settling like dust in the stale air. Vance didn't answer. She couldn't. The thought had crossed her mind more than once, but she had pushed it away, convinced that the knowledge they were chasing was worth the risk. Still, doubt lingered. They continued moving, albeit with a greater sense of caution. The structure's architecture began to shift as they ventured deeper. What had once been smooth, seamless walls gave way to jagged edges and fractured surfaces. The technology they had relied on to map their surroundings was no longer responding as it should. Signals were scrambled, readings were distorted, and even Mira's advanced equipment was beginning to malfunction. Dreyfus stopped again, scanning their surroundings. "This isn't right. The further we go, the more unstable this place becomes." "We're close," Vance insisted, her voice sharp with tension. "We have to be." Rhys, walking beside Mira, leaned closer to her. "This isn't like anything I've seen before," he muttered under his breath. "And I've been in some messed up places." Mira nodded, though her focus remained on her tablet. She had been silent for most of the journey, but now, as they ventured further into the depths, she felt a growing sense of dread. The inscriptions were becoming more complex, the symbols shifting and changing with each step they took. It was as if the structure itself was evolving, adapting to their presence. "I think I figured something out," she said suddenly, her voice barely above a whisper. The rest of the team stopped, turning to face her. "What is it?" Vance asked, her eyes wide with curiosity. Mira hesitated before continuing. "This place, it's not just a ruin. It's a network. Each of these inscriptions, each piece of technology we've encountered, they're connected. And I think this is just one part of something much larger." Vance frowned, her mind racing to process what Mira was saying. Larger how? I mean, this isn't the only structure like this. There are more on other planets, maybe even scattered across the galaxy. Dreyfus swore under his breath. And you're telling us this now? Mira shook her head. I didn't know until just now. The data I've been collecting, it's starting to form a pattern. This place is a hub, a key to something bigger. Rhys narrowed his eyes. And what exactly are we supposed to do with that information? We're barely holding it together in here, and now you're saying there's more of these out there? Mira looked up at him, her expression somber. I don't know. But if we solve this, if we figure out what this key unlocks, it could change everything. Dreyfus ran a hand through his hair, frustration bubbling just beneath the surface. Or it could destroy us. As they ventured deeper, the alien structure seemed to warp around them, the walls becoming more abstract, the carving shifting and undulating in a way that made it difficult to discern reality from hallucination. The air felt thicker, more oppressive, and the once rhythmic hum of the place had grown discordant, like an instrument being played just out of tune. Vance pushed forward with renewed determination, her mind consumed with the idea that they were on the verge of unlocking something monumental. The knowledge, the power hidden within this structure, could be the key to humanity's survival or its destruction. But even she couldn't ignore the subtle changes in the atmosphere. The deeper they went, the more the space around them seemed to rebel against their intrusion. The walls began to close in, the once wide corridors now narrowing to the point where they had to move single file. Mira's voice was tense as she whispered, I'm getting strange readings. This place is shifting. Rhys, ever the soldier, kept his hand on his weapon, though he knew it would be useless against whatever forces they were dealing with here. How much further? We're close, Vance repeated, though the conviction in her voice had started to waver. They reached another chamber, this one larger, more imposing than the others. In the center of the room stood a massive structure, its surface covered in more of the alien inscriptions, glowing faintly in the dim light. It was different from the rest of the building, more intricate, as if it had been placed here for a specific purpose. Vance stepped forward, her eyes wide with wonder. This is it. This is what we've been looking for. Dreyfus moved to her side, his gaze wary. And what exactly are we supposed to do now? Vance hesitated for only a moment before placing her hand on the structure. The inscriptions lit up, spreading out from her touch in a cascade of light. The air hummed with energy, and the room seemed to pulse with life. But then, the light flickered and dimmed, the energy dissipating as quickly as it had come. Nothing happened. Vance frowned, her hand still resting on the structure. Why didn't it work? Mira stepped forward, examining the inscriptions. It's incomplete. This is just one part of the key. We're missing something. Vance's heart sank. So there's more, on other planets. Dreyfus swore again, his patience running thin. So what now? We can't just keep wandering around, hoping to find the missing pieces. Vance looked up at him, her expression determined. We don't have a choice. We have to find the rest of the key. Whatever this unlocks, it's too important to leave unfinished. Rhys stepped forward, his eyes scanning the room. And if it's something we're not meant to unlock? Vance met his gaze, her voice steady. Then we'll deal with the consequences when the time comes. The room fell silent again, the weight of their mission settling heavily on their shoulders. The chamber was quiet, yet the silence felt dense, almost sentient. Every breath the team took reverberated through the air, though none spoke for a long time. The strange, almost gravitational pull that had driven them through the ruin had finally led them here to a small, unassuming alcove carved into the farthest reaches of the alien structure. In the dim light, the object sat unceremoniously on a stone pedestal. It was no larger than a human hand, yet it radiated a presence that far exceeded its physical dimensions. The key-like object seemed almost alive, its surface pulsating with faint patterns, shifting between geometric shapes and alien symbols that were impossible to comprehend. Vance, standing closest, was the first to reach for it. The team had been prepared for traps, for hostile defenses, anything that might suggest the object didn't want to be disturbed, but there was nothing. The key rested in her palm, light as air. And then, everything changed. It began subtly, as if the very fabric of reality had been nudged. A slight hum filled the room, not audible but felt in their bones. Then the visions came, not as flashes or images, but as fully formed experiences, memories of another civilization, another time. The alien race, long gone, came alive in their minds. Vance gasped as her surroundings dissolved. She was no longer in the ruin, but walking through an alien city, its architecture impossibly advanced, blending the organic with the technological. Tall spires reached into the heavens, their surfaces glistening with a material that wasn't metal nor stone, but something in between. The sky above was a deep, swirling indigo, far different from Earth's, filled with unfamiliar stars. The aliens themselves were there too, not in physical form, but as feelings, impressions. Vance could sense their lives, their thoughts, a collective, vast intelligence spread across the city, every individual part of something greater. But then, almost as quickly, it changed. The city fell, not in the violent, fiery way she might have expected, but like a slow unraveling. The bonds that had held their civilization together loosened, their once grand structures slowly decaying, their technology ceasing to function. The alien race, once brilliant and unified, became fragmented, isolated. The tragedy of their fall wasn't one of conquest, but of self-destruction, of minds that had reached too far, that had been consumed by their own advancements. Vance felt the weight of their downfall as if it were her own. The sadness, the regret, it was overwhelming. When the vision faded and she was back in the ruin, she nearly collapsed. Her breath came in shallow gasps, her hand still clutching the key tightly. "What did you see?" Dreyfus's voice cut through the haze, pulling her back to the present. She looked up at him, her eyes unfocused, trying to gather her thoughts. "It wasn't just a vision, it was a memory. I saw their world. I felt them." Dreyfus frowned, his expression hardening. "And what does that get us? We came here for answers, not someone else's nightmares." Vance's grip tightened around the key. "You don't understand. This isn't just a piece of metal. It's connected to them, to everything they were." Dreyfus's frustration was palpable. He turned away, pacing the room. "You're letting this get into your head. We're not here to mourn a dead species. We have a mission. Focus." But Vance couldn't just shake it off. The images still lingered, haunting her. The tragedy of the alien race, the way they had reached too far and collapsed under the weight of their own progress, it felt too familiar, too human. Mira and Rhys, standing to the side, had their own experience with the key, though it wasn't as overwhelming as what Vance had felt. For them, the visions were more fragmented, glimpses of a world they could barely comprehend. Mira, always the pragmatic one, was the first to break the silence between them. "Do you think we'll end up like them?" she asked, her voice barely audible. Rhys didn't answer immediately. He leaned against the cool, stone wall, staring at the floor as if searching for something deeper in the cracks beneath his feet. "I don't know. Maybe it's inevitable. Maybe it's what happens when you advance too far, when you lose sight of what really matters." She glanced at him, sensing the weight behind his words. "You don't really believe that, do you?" Rhys sighed. "I've seen what happens when people think they've got it all figured out. It never ends well. You get too comfortable, too reliant on your own power. You forget about the cost." Mira stepped closer, her hand brushing his arm in a rare moment of softness. "But we're not them. We're not doomed to repeat the same mistakes." He looked at her, his expression unreadable. "Aren't we? The more we push, the more we lose. Maybe not all at once, but slowly, bit by bit." Their words hung in the air, heavy with the implications of their mission. They weren't just unlocking ancient alien secrets. They were facing the question of whether humanity was following the same path to ruin. Dreyfus turned back to Vance, his patience clearly wearing thin. "We need to focus on the task at hand. This key, whatever it is, it's just a tool. We can't get distracted by whatever visions you're having." Vance looked up, her expression sharper now. "These visions are showing us something important. This isn't just a puzzle, it's a warning." "A warning?" Dreyfus scoffed, crossing his arms. "From who? A civilization that couldn't even save itself." "They didn't fail because they were weak," Vance shot back. "They failed because they reached too far, too fast. They lost sight of what was important." "And you think we're any different?" There was a tense pause before Vance spoke again, her voice quieter now. "I don't know. But if we don't learn from what happened to them, we're going to end up just like they did." Dreyfus didn't respond immediately. He stared at her for a long moment before turning away again, clearly unwilling to engage with the deeper implications of her words. As the tension in the room simmered, Mira and Rhys sat down on the cold stone floor, their backs against the wall. The chamber was vast, but now it felt small, the weight of the key's discovery pressing in on them from all sides. "Do you think we should have left it alone?" Mira asked quietly, her fingers absently tracing a crack in the stone beneath her. Rhys didn't answer right away, his eyes fixed on the key that Vance still held. "Sometimes I think we shouldn't have come here at all, but we can't undo what's already been set in motion." Mira nodded, though her mind seemed elsewhere. She leaned her head back against the wall, closing her eyes. "It's strange, isn't it? The way we're always chasing after things we don't understand. And then, when we finally catch up to them, we realize they were never really meant for us in the first place." Rhys turned to look at her, something in her words striking a chord deep within him. "You think this was never meant for us?" Mira smiled softly, a touch of sadness in her expression. "I think we're always trying to grab hold of things that don't belong to us. Technology, power, knowledge. It's like we're afraid of being left behind, so we reach for whatever's in front of us, no matter the cost." Rhys didn't respond, but the look in his eyes told her he understood. Vance, still clutching the key, took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. The visions had been overwhelming, but she couldn't ignore the pull she felt toward this alien race. Their downfall was a tragedy, yes, but it was also a lesson, a reminder of the fragility of even the most advanced civilizations. The first key had shown them the past, but what would the others reveal? And more importantly, could humanity heed the warning before it was too late? The air in the chamber grew colder, the walls almost seeming to pulse with the weight of the ancient memories contained within. The key was only the beginning. But even now, standing at the threshold of an unimaginable discovery, there was a sense of foreboding. Vance could feel it in her bones, the gnawing certainty that whatever they were unlocking wasn't just an answer to their questions, but a test. And the price of failure, perhaps the very future of humanity itself. The chamber around them groaned, a deep, resonating sound that reverberated through the very walls. Rhys's breath caught as he felt the vibration in his chest, like a distant storm rumbling through the ground. At first, it was subtle, a shift in the atmosphere, a sensation that the structure itself had been disturbed. But then the ceiling above began to crack, fissures spider webbing outward from where Vance had removed the key. It was as if the ruin was alive, not in the way they had imagined sentient and ancient, but something far more mechanical, cold. A structure that, now broken, had no choice but to unwind. The key had been a vital piece, an anchor, and with it gone, everything around them began to unravel. "Move," Dreyfus's voice cut through the growing chaos. His face was rigid, set in determination, though his eyes flickered with the same fear that had lodged itself in Rhys's gut. They didn't hesitate. Vance, still clutching the key in her shaking hand, bolted ahead, her footsteps uneven as she fought to regain her balance on the trembling floor. The others followed, navigating the narrow corridors as the ruin shifted, its once still halls now alive with violent movement. Stone debris rained down from above, sharp edges slicing through the air. Every step felt precarious, every breath tense with the knowledge that the next one might be their last. Rhys fell back slightly, keeping to the rear of the group, his instincts flaring with the urge to protect. It had been drilled into him, this need to shield others, to put himself between danger and the people around him. And yet, even as his body reacted, pushing him to action, a darker part of his mind whispered in the gaps of his thoughts. What did it matter if he survived? What was left for him, really? His heart pounded against his ribs, not from exertion, but from the weight of the question. He hadn't wanted to be here in the first place. Now, faced with the impending collapse of the ruin, the idea of simply stopping, of letting the ceiling come down and crush him into the dirt, gnawed at him with an unsettling allure. "Rhys," Mira's voice called from ahead, sharp and focused. She had paused, her eyes locking with his as she waited for him to catch up. Her expression was tense, but there was something else there too: concern. Not fear, not panic, but concern. For him. For a moment, he considered not answering her. But he couldn't ignore the instinct pulling him forward, dragging his legs through the narrow corridor. He met her gaze as he passed, not saying a word, but the way her brow furrowed told him she knew. She knew he wasn't all right. Ahead, Vance stumbled, her hands shooting out to brace against the crumbling wall as a section of ceiling caved in behind her. Dust filled the air, making it harder to see, harder to breathe. She could feel the key pulsing in her grip, its surface growing warm as if it were alive, reacting to the destruction it had caused. Her mind was racing, every calculation she had made about the ruin, about the key wrong. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. They were supposed to learn something here, to unlock a mystery, not trigger the ruin's death. How could she have miscalculated so badly? How could she have been so reckless? "Vance, keep moving," Dreyfus's voice echoed through the corridor, and she forced herself forward, ignoring the gnawing doubt that threatened to paralyze her. Her thoughts spun as they ran, flashes of the alien civilization's fall bleeding into her consciousness. She could still feel the remnants of their memories, their collective grief, their loss. It felt personal now, their tragedy intertwined with her own failures. Had they too miscalculated, reached too far without understanding the consequences? The weight of that parallel sat heavy on her, a burden she hadn't anticipated carrying. She pushed herself harder, her breaths coming in sharp gasps as they reached the next chamber. The room was vast, with towering columns reaching up toward the ceiling that now creaked under the strain of the collapsing ruin. At the far end, an exit freedom, if they could make it. But something shifted in the air, an almost imperceptible change. The ruins weren't just collapsing randomly. The destruction was guided, deliberate. A deep thrumming sound reverberated through the floor, an energy they hadn't felt before coursing through the walls. Vance froze, her eyes scanning the room. Something had been awakened. "Go!" Dreyfus shouted as he darted toward the exit, his movements quick, purposeful. Rhys found himself moving faster now, his thoughts sharpening as adrenaline surged through him. The weight of his earlier doubts didn't disappear, but they took a back seat, eclipsed by the urgency of survival. He could feel the ground beneath his feet growing more unstable, the vibration stronger. There wasn't much time. Ahead, Mira had already reached the far side, her hands braced against the large stone door that marked their way out. She pushed with all her strength, but the door barely budged. Rhys joined her, his shoulder slamming into the stone. Together, they heaved against the door, but it resisted, unmoving. Behind them, the walls began to buckle, sections of stone falling away. "We don't have time for this." Mira's voice was strained, panic threading through her words as she glanced back at the others. Vance and Dreyfus were still crossing the chamber, but the ceiling above them was caving in, huge slabs of rock crashing to the ground with deafening force. Rhys's mind raced. They couldn't stop now. Not here, not when they were so close. He stepped back, his eyes scanning the door, the walls, the ceiling, looking for any weak point, any way to force the door open. But the structure was old, ancient beyond comprehension. Whatever mechanism controlled the door had likely been buried beneath centuries of decay, lost to time. A flicker of movement caught his eye, and he turned toward Vance, who was still clutching the key. The key, the thought hit him like a jolt of electricity. It wasn't just a relic. It was part of this place, part of the alien technology that had built the ruin. "Vance!" he shouted, his voice cutting through the chaos. "The key, it's connected to the door." Vance looked up, her face pale with dust and strain. She hesitated, her grip tightening on the key. The pulsing warmth it emitted had grown stronger, and she could feel its energy thrumming in her hand, vibrating with a rhythm that matched the ruin's collapse. Without another word, she rushed toward the door, her mind racing through the possibilities. The key wasn't just a symbol, wasn't just a piece of the puzzle, it was a tool, a part of the alien technology still alive in this place. She reached the door, and as her hand came into contact with the stone, a surge of energy coursed through her. The key flared in her hand, and the door shifted. Slowly at first, but then, with a loud, grinding sound, it began to open. As the door gave way, the team stumbled through, the air outside sharp and cold compared to the dust-filled chaos they had left behind. They were out. For now. Rhys stood at the threshold, his chest heaving as he caught his breath. The sky above them was dark, a canvas of swirling clouds that seemed to stretch on forever. The stars distant, unblinking, offered no comfort. Instead, they felt like witnesses to their escape, silent and indifferent. Behind them, the ruin continued to collapse, a slow and steady crumbling that felt final. The key in Vance's hand had cooled, its pulse fading to a low hum, but its significance hadn't diminished. They had escaped with their lives, but the consequences of what they had unleashed were still unknown. Rhys glanced at the others. Dreyfus was already moving, his eyes scanning the horizon, calculating their next steps. Mira was leaning against the rock, her face pale but determined, and Vance stood apart, the key still clutched in her hand, her gaze distant, lost in thought. No one spoke for a long time. The weight of what had just happened, what they had narrowly avoided, hung over them like a shadow. Rhys felt his doubts creeping back, the brief rush of survival fading into the background. What had they really accomplished here? They had the key, yes, but at what cost? And what was this key leading them toward? He stared out at the desolate landscape that stretched before them, feeling the weight of it all pressing down on him again. The desire for an end, any end, lingered in his mind, but something else was growing alongside it. A sense that this was only the beginning, that whatever they had awakened wasn't finished with them yet. The ruin may have crumbled, but time had other plans. The air was thick and still, as if the world around them had been holding its breath for centuries. Rhys felt it before he saw them, the sense that something was watching, something hidden in the deep shadows of the jagged landscape. He tightened his grip on the rifle slung across his shoulder, his fingers instinctively brushing the worn metal surface. The weight of it, the cold, rough texture, grounded him in the present moment, but did little to ease the gnawing tension in his chest. They had been walking for hours now, the ruin a distant memory crumbling in their wake. The sky above was an overcast haze, thick with storm clouds that had yet to break. Every step they took was deliberate, cautious, as if each footfall might awaken something else beneath the surface of this world, something ancient, waiting. Dreyfus led the way, his posture stiff, his eyes constantly scanning the terrain ahead. His jaw was set in that familiar hard line, the look of a man who had long since grown accustomed to danger. He moved with purpose, but there was an edge to his movements, a subtle hesitation. He knew, as they all did, that they were walking into something far more complex than they had anticipated. Vance trailed behind, the key tucked securely in her pack. She hadn't said much since the collapse of the ruin, her silence unnerving in a way that words couldn't have been. It was clear she was lost in her own mind, calculations turning over and over, trying to make sense of the visions she'd seen, the connection she felt to the fallen civilization. Her obsession had grown sharper, more focused, and though she tried to hide it, the others could feel the tension radiating off her in waves. Rhys walked beside Mira, their steps in quiet sync. They hadn't spoken much since their escape, but there was a new understanding between them, a bond that had formed in the heat of survival, something unspoken but felt in the way they moved together, their breaths almost aligning. The land around them was desolate, jagged rock formations jutting out from the earth like the bones of some long-forgotten creature. The silence pressed down on them, broken only by the occasional crunch of gravel beneath their boots. And then, almost imperceptibly at first, the shadows began to shift. Rhys froze mid-step, his eyes narrowing as he stared at the space just ahead of Dreyfus. A ripple, like the movement of air on a hot day, passed through the shadows, distorting the jagged rocks for just a moment before everything snapped back into place. Dreyfus saw it too. His hand went up, signaling for the group to stop. The air felt denser now, charged with something unseen. Rhys's heart rate quickened, his body responding before his mind could fully process what was happening. It wasn't fear exactly, more like a primal alertness, a warning that they were no longer alone. Out of the corner of his eye, Rhys saw Vance tense, her hand instinctively reaching toward the key in her pack, as if it held some hidden answer. But it wasn't the key that would help them now. A figure emerged from the shadows. It wasn't sudden, there was no dramatic reveal, no instant confrontation. The figure simply materialized as if it had always been there, camouflaged within the dark. It stood tall, humanoid in form, though its features were obscured by the dark metal that covered its body like armor. The texture of its skin seemed to shift and ripple like liquid, reflecting the dim light in strange patterns that made it hard to focus on any one part of it. Rhys's breath caught as more of them began to appear, stepping forward from the shadows with the same eerie grace. There were 5 of them now, each one silent, their faces hidden behind masks that bore no visible eyes, no mouths, just smooth, featureless surfaces that reflected the landscape around them. "Sentinels," Mira whispered under her breath, her voice tight with awe and unease. Dreyfus took a step forward, his posture defensive but not aggressive. His hand hovered near his sidearm, but he didn't draw it. Not yet. He knew better than to escalate things without understanding what they were dealing with. The lead sentinel tilted its head slightly, as if observing them, though there were no eyes to meet. When it spoke, the voice was deep and resonant, vibrating through the air rather than coming from any visible source. "You have trespassed," it said, the words slow and deliberate, echoing with a weight that felt older than time itself. "This place is not for you." Rhys felt a chill crawl up his spine. The voice wasn't human, but there was something unnervingly familiar in its cadence, its tone. As if it were speaking not just to them, but to something deep within them, something instinctual. "We didn't mean to trespass," Dreyfus said, his voice steady but measured. "We were trying to escape the collapse. We didn't know." The sentinel raised a hand, cutting him off. The movement was precise, controlled. "You have taken something that does not belong to you, the key." Vance stiffened, her hand tightening on the strap of her pack. Rhys could see the conflict in her eyes, the instinct to protect what they had found, to hold on to it at all costs. But there was something else too, a flicker of uncertainty. Dreyfus turned toward her, his gaze sharp. "Vance, give it to them." She hesitated, her knuckles white against the pack. "We can't. We don't even know what it is yet." "Vance," Dreyfus's voice was hard now, a warning. "Give it to them." For a moment, the tension in the air was so thick Rhys could feel it pressing against his skin. He could see the conflict in Vance's eyes, the war between her intellect and her instincts. She didn't want to give it up, he knew that much. But there was no choice here. Not really. Reluctantly, she reached into her pack and pulled out the key. Its surface gleamed in the dim light, its edges sharp and cold. She held it out, her hand trembling slightly as she offered it to the sentinel. The sentinel's arm extended, long and graceful, and as its fingers closed around the key, Rhys felt something shift in the air. A subtle change, like the tension in a wire being released. The sentinel held the key for a moment, then retracted its arm, the key disappearing into the folds of its dark armor. "You will leave now," the sentinel said, its voice low and final. "This is not your place." Dreyfus didn't argue. He gave a single nod, turning to the others. "Let's go." They began to move, their footsteps heavy and deliberate as they walked away from the sentinels, their figures still standing silent and unmoving in the shadows. Rhys could feel the weight of their gaze, or whatever passed for a gaze, on his back as they left. The sense that they had been judged, measured, and found lacking. As they moved farther from the encounter, the landscape shifted again, the jagged rocks giving way to a more open, barren expanse. The wind picked up, carrying with it the faint scent of something metallic, sharp against the cold air. They walked in silence for a long time, the weight of the encounter pressing down on them. Rhys kept his eyes on the horizon, but his mind was still caught in the web of what had just happened. The sentinels had let them go, but why? And what had they awakened by taking the key in the first place? Vance walked beside him, her face pale, her expression tight with frustration. She was angry, he could see it in the way her fists clenched, in the way her steps were just a little too forceful, as if she were trying to outrun her own thoughts. "They're hiding something," she muttered, half to herself, half to him. "They know more than they're letting on." "Maybe," Rhys replied, his voice quiet. "But that doesn't mean we should push our luck." She shot him a look, her eyes flashing with that same intensity that had driven her from the start. "We're not done here, Rhys. Not by a long shot." He didn't answer, but the unease settled deeper in his gut. He wasn't sure if they were ever going to be done with this place, or with what they had set in motion. The cavern before them stretched into the darkness, a vast and silent expanse carved into the living rock. The air was cooler here, thick with a scent of damp earth and something else, something ancient. Rhys felt it, a weight pressing against his skin like a cold hand resting on the back of his neck. He glanced toward the sentinels, their tall forms standing just beyond the threshold, as still and unyielding as statues. Dreyfus moved cautiously ahead, his steps echoing off the stone walls. His eyes were sharp, calculating, but there was tension in his movements, a slight edge to the way his hand hovered near his sidearm. This place, whatever it was, felt alive in ways none of them could fully grasp. "This is where you will find the second key," the lead sentinel had said before they entered, its voice low and resonant. "But the trials that guard it are not for the unworthy. You must prove yourselves if you are to leave this place whole." Vance had been the first to step forward, her eagerness barely masked by the cool professionalism in her voice. "What kind of trials?" The sentinel hadn't answered directly, only tilting its head as if the question itself was too simple to merit a response. "You will know when you are tested." Now, as the group ventured deeper into the cavern, Rhys could feel the weight of those words settling over him like a shroud. Each step felt heavier than the last, the air growing colder, denser, as if the cave itself was shifting around them, drawing them into something unknown. They came to a large, open chamber, the walls lined with strange symbols that glowed faintly in the dim light. At the far end, a stone pedestal stood, empty save for a smooth, round indentation at its center. The second key would fit there, but the path to it was anything but clear. Vance stepped forward, her gaze fixed on the pedestal, her eyes gleaming with that same intense focus that Rhys had seen in her ever since they first discovered the ruins. She moved with a deliberate grace, her hands reaching out to brush against the glowing symbols. "These markings," she muttered, almost to herself, "there's some kind of language. Maybe instructions." Rhys watched as her fingers traced the lines, her brow furrowed in concentration. There was an energy about her, a raw hunger that seemed to pulse beneath her calm exterior. She wanted to understand this place, to uncover its secrets, no matter the cost. Dreyfus, meanwhile, paced around the chamber, his gaze flicking from the pedestal to the symbols and back again. His jaw was tight, his movements careful, as if he were waiting for something to spring out of the shadows. He had the look of a man who had seen too many traps, too many disasters unfold from seemingly harmless beginnings. "This feels wrong," he said, his voice low. "We're missing something." Mira stood by Rhys, her eyes scanning the walls with a quiet curiosity. There was a steadiness to her that Rhys had come to admire, a calmness that contrasted sharply with the tension radiating from Vance and Dreyfus. She didn't say much, but her presence was grounding, a small anchor in the midst of growing uncertainty. Without warning, the floor beneath them began to tremble, a low rumble that built into a deep, resonant hum. The symbols along the walls flared to life, their light intensifying until the entire chamber was bathed in an eerie, pulsing glow. And then the walls shifted, Massive stone panels began to move, sliding apart with a grinding sound that reverberated through the cavern. From the gaps emerged intricate machinery, alien mechanisms that clicked and whirred as they locked into place. The air hummed with energy, and a voice cold and distant, yet unmistakably alive, spoke from the very stones around them. The first trial begins. The floor beneath Vance split open, and before she could react, she was falling, her scream cut short as she disappeared into the dark. Vance, Rhys lunged toward the edge of the chasm, but Dreyfus was faster, grabbing him by the arm and pulling him back. "Don't, we can't risk another fall," Dreyfus barked, his voice tight with fear. His eyes darted around, looking for a way to follow. Before they could move, a second voice rang out from below. It was Vance's, breathless but alive. "I'm fine. There's something down here. A tunnel. You need to keep moving." Relief washed over them, but it was short-lived as the alien voice spoke again, its words vibrating through their bones. "Only those who face their truths may pass." The symbols on the walls began to shift, twisting and changing, their meanings elusive but unmistakably powerful. The trials had begun. Vance stood in the darkness, her heart pounding, her mind racing. The tunnel stretched before her, narrow and oppressive, its walls smooth and featureless. The air here was thick, heavy, as if the weight of centuries pressed down on her with every breath. She had always prided herself on her intellect, her ability to see patterns where others saw chaos. But here, in the dark, she felt small, insignificant, an intruder in a place that had long since forgotten the presence of humanity. The symbols along the walls pulsed faintly, casting a dim light over the narrow path. As she moved forward, the symbols shifted again, forming images, visions that flickered just at the edge of her consciousness. She saw herself, standing in the ruins of Earth's cities, surrounded by crumbling skyscrapers and burning skies. The knowledge she sought had come at a terrible cost, and yet she was unrepentant. Her desire for understanding, for power, was stronger than any regret. But as the vision faded, a new one took its place, this time of her standing alone, clutching the key, but with no one left to share its secrets. The faces of her team, Dreyfus, Rhys, Mira, drifted past her, distant, unreachable. The trial wasn't physical. It was a test of obsession, of desire. She could feel the weight of it now, the danger of letting her need for knowledge consume her, of losing herself in the pursuit of something that might never be fully understood. She hesitated, her breath catching in her throat. This was her test. Could she let go? Could she walk away from the knowledge she craved so desperately? Dreyfus. Above, the chamber shifted again, and Dreyfus found himself standing alone as the floor beneath him split into jagged cracks. His surroundings blurred, and suddenly, he was no longer in the alien cavern. He was back on Earth, standing in the ruins of a battlefield, one he had led years ago. The smell of smoke and ash filled his lungs, the distant cries of the wounded echoing in his ears. His men were scattered, their faces pale with fear, their bodies broken. He had failed them. He had led them into a trap, and now they were paying the price. Dreyfus clenched his fists, the weight of his past failures pressing down on him like a vice. He had always feared this moment, being confronted with the consequences of his decisions. The trial was clear now. It wasn't about surviving. It was about confronting the fear that had haunted him for years, the fear of making the wrong choice again. But as he stood there, the faces of his fallen soldiers began to fade, replaced by those of his current team. Rhys, Mira, Vance, they were depending on him now. He couldn't afford to fail again. His jaw tightened, his breath steadying. He wouldn't let the fear control him. Not this time. Rhys stumbled as the ground beneath him tilted sharply, the walls around him spinning in a dizzying blur. He had always been good in high-stakes situations, but this was different. There was no enemy to fight, no clear goal to focus on, just the weight of his own thoughts, pressing in on him like the suffocating darkness of the cave. The trial took him deeper into himself, forcing him to confront the question he had been avoiding for so long: why was he still here? He had wanted death for so long, had sought it out in the most dangerous missions, the most reckless choices. But now, standing on the precipice of survival or destruction, something inside him shifted. The desire for death was no longer as strong as it had been. The faces of his team flashed before him: Vance, Mira, even Dreyfus. They had come to rely on him, and in turn, he had come to rely on them. The bond they had formed, fragile and tenuous, was enough to give him pause. For the first time in a long time, Rhys felt the stirrings of something unfamiliar hope. The dilapidated corridor stretched out before them, its walls adorned with symbols that flickered and shifted as the group moved. The darkness seemed to breathe, pulsing in sync with the slow, rhythmic hum of the alien machinery embedded in the walls. Each step they took echoed, amplifying the tension that gripped the air. Shadows played tricks on their eyes, twisting the solid forms of their surroundings into nightmarish shapes. The team had just retrieved the second key, its surface a complex lattice of alien glyphs that seemed to pulse with a life of its own. Yet, despite their success, an unsettling realization had begun to settle over them like a heavy fog. This alien structure was not merely a relic, but a repository of something much greater, something they had only begun to comprehend. As they huddled around a makeshift camp in one of the less dilapidated sections of the ruin, the flickering light from their portable lanterns cast long, wavering shadows. Dr. Amelia Vance stared intently at the second key, her fingers tracing the intricate designs. The glyphs, though alien, seemed to resonate with a strange familiarity in her mind. She could almost feel the weight of millennia pressing against her. "Do you realize what this means?" Vance said, her voice barely above a whisper. Her eyes were wild, almost feverish with a mix of excitement and dread. "This key, it's not just a piece of technology. It's a gateway to understanding a civilization that predated all known life. We're on the brink of uncovering something that could reshape our understanding of existence itself." Captain Dreyfus, sitting across from her, ran a hand through his hair, frustration etched deeply into his features. "Amelia, I get that this is important, but we're in over our heads. We've seen the warning signs, the destruction of this place, the sentinels. What if we're delving into something we're not meant to comprehend? What if our actions are putting more than just our lives at risk?" Vance shot him a sharp look, her expression a mixture of anger and disbelief. "We can't just stop now. Not when we're so close. You don't understand what this means to the future of humanity." The tension between them was palpable, thickening the already heavy air. Mira, who had been quietly observing, shifted uneasily. Her gaze flitted between Vance and Dreyfus, sensing the growing rift between them. She had been loyal to Vance's vision, but now found herself caught in a moral quagmire. What was the right course of action? She felt the weight of responsibility more acutely than ever. Sergeant Lucas Rhys, who had been sitting silently, his face shadowed by a pained expression, finally spoke up. "Maybe Amelia's right. Maybe this is the breakthrough we need. But there's something else here. I feel it, a sense of unease that I can't shake." His voice was strained, revealing the inner turmoil he had been hiding. The trial had left him questioning everything he believed in, and now the threat of unseen forces only intensified his fear. He was struggling to find meaning in his own existence amidst the chaos of their mission. The room fell silent, the only sound the low hum of the alien machinery and the occasional drip of water from a crack in the ceiling. Vance's eyes narrowed as she considered Dreyfus's words, her mind racing through the implications. The ancient warning they had discovered hinted at a catastrophic event linked to their quest. What had these alien beings known that they did not? Outside, the ruin continued to shift and groan, as if alive and reacting to their presence. The Sentinel's earlier warning was clear: the knowledge contained within these ruins was dangerous. The implications of their discovery were becoming increasingly clear. This mission was not just about finding ancient artifacts. It was about encountering a force that had the potential to reshape or even destroy civilizations. Vance stood abruptly, her expression a mask of determination and conflict. "We have to continue. We can't back down now. The knowledge we're seeking could be the key to understanding our place in the universe. It could be the key to saving humanity." Dreyfus stood as well, his eyes locked on hers. The weight of his decision pressed heavily on him. Amelia, this isn't just about knowledge. It's about survival. And I have to ask, what if this knowledge leads to our destruction? What if we're walking into a trap that was set eons ago? Vance's face softened slightly, her resolve unshaken. Then we face it. We have to take that risk. But we have to be prepared for what we might find. The tension in the room was almost tangible, a sharp contrast to the eerie calm outside. Mira and Rhys exchanged a glance, a silent understanding passing between them. They were part of something much larger than themselves, and the choices they made now would echo across the cosmos. As the group prepared to continue their journey, a new realization dawned upon them. The puzzle they were trying to solve was not merely a test of their skills, but a reflection of their deepest fears and desires. The alien ruins, with their enigmatic warnings and ancient secrets, were forcing them to confront the very essence of their being. Vance clutched the second key tightly, her fingers brushing against the alien symbols. The weight of her decision, and the responsibility it carried, was almost overwhelming. She was driven by a need to understand, to uncover the truths hidden within the ruins. But in her pursuit, she was also facing the harsh reality of what such knowledge could mean. Dreyfus, torn between duty and caution, was grappling with his own fears. His role as a leader was being tested in ways he had never anticipated. The safety of his team, and the broader implications of their mission, were heavy on his shoulders. Rhys, struggling with his past and his purpose, was beginning to see a glimmer of hope amidst the darkness. The trials he had faced had changed him, giving him a renewed sense of determination. He was beginning to understand that survival was not just about enduring, but about finding meaning in the chaos. Mira, caught in the crossfire of their internal conflicts, was growing more confident in her role. Her technical skills and quiet strength were becoming crucial to their success. She was learning to navigate the complexities of their mission and the interpersonal dynamics of the team. The group moved forward, their path lit by the soft glow of their lanterns and the flickering lights of the alien machinery. The mysteries of the ancient ruins awaited them, their secrets hidden in the shadows. Each step they took was a step deeper into the unknown, and the echoes of the past continued to shape their journey. As they ventured further into the labyrinthine structure, the sense of impending danger grew stronger. The ancient warnings of the alien creators were not mere threats, but profound truths about the nature of knowledge and power. The team was on the brink of uncovering something that could alter their understanding of existence itself. The labyrinthine passages of the alien ruin felt more claustrophobic with each step. The walls, once seemingly solid, now appeared almost fluid, shifting as if they were alive. The flickering lights cast erratic shadows, creating a sense of foreboding that grew with every turn. The team's progress through the structure had been marked by an increasing sense of urgency and dread. Dr. Amelia Vance, clutching the third key, a crystalline shard with an intricate network of veins that pulsed softly in the dim light, walked with a feverish intensity. Her eyes were locked onto the object, her fingers tracing its surface with a mixture of reverence and obsession. The shard seemed to resonate with her, sending ripples through her thoughts. Captain Dreyfus moved beside her, his face a mask of stoic resolve. He was keeping his distance from Vance, both physically and emotionally. His mind was consumed with the weight of their discoveries, each step deeper into the ruins, amplifying his sense of isolation from the mission's goals. The tension between them had reached a breaking point, and every word exchanged seemed to deepen the chasm between their perspectives. Sergeant Lucas Rhys followed closely, his movements more deliberate than before. The recent trials had shaken him, but his newfound sense of purpose was solidifying. He was no longer just a soldier, but a crucial part of a team grappling with existential dilemmas. His role had shifted from mere participant to one of stabilization, a grounding force in the maelstrom of Vance's growing obsession and Dreyfus's detachment. Mira, observing the dynamics with a keen eye, was becoming the emotional anchor for the group. Her technical expertise had proven invaluable, but it was her quiet strength and empathy that held the team together. She was caught in the crossfire of Vance's unyielding determination and Dreyfus's increasingly distant demeanor. Her internal struggle mirrored the larger conflict. Should she support Vance's unrelenting quest for knowledge or heed Dreyfus's caution? The third key, when finally discovered, was hidden in a chamber that seemed to pulse with an eerie energy. The room was vast, its ceiling lost in darkness. The walls were covered with alien inscriptions that seemed to shift and writhe as if alive. In the center of the chamber, a pedestal held the key, surrounded by a series of interlocking mechanisms that looked both ancient and incredibly advanced. Vance's eyes lit up with an almost manic excitement as she approached the pedestal. This is it. The final piece of the puzzle. We're so close now. Dreyfus, standing a few paces back, could only watch with a mixture of apprehension and frustration. Amelia, we need to be cautious. We don't know what will happen once we unlock the full puzzle. The risks are too great. Ignoring him, Vance carefully lifted the key from its pedestal. The moment she touched it, the entire chamber seemed to shudder. A low, resonant hum filled the air, growing louder and more insistent. The walls began to glow with an unsettling light, and the inscriptions seemed to come alive, their meaning becoming clearer, but also more ominous. The key itself was a crystalline shard, its surface covered in a lattice of glowing symbols. As Vance examined it, she felt a surge of energy that seemed to connect her directly to the ancient civilization. Visions flashed before her eyes, glimpses of a world in turmoil, cities burning, and a race on the brink of annihilation. These images, Vance said, her voice trembling with awe and fear. They're showing us the end of their world, the cataclysm that destroyed them. Mira approached cautiously, her eyes scanning the symbols on the walls. What does it mean? What are we unlocking? The answer came in a burst of static from their communication devices, a message from the alien technology itself. The voice was distorted, but the message was clear. Beware the price of knowledge. To unlock the full puzzle is to awaken forces that should remain dormant. The cataclysm that befell us will befall you. The weight of the message settled heavily over the team. The implications were stark. Unlocking the full puzzle would trigger a catastrophic event that could potentially destroy entire star systems. Dreyfus's expression hardened. We have to stop. This knowledge is too dangerous. We're playing with forces we don't fully understand. Vance's reaction was immediate and visceral. No, we can't stop now. We've come too far. The potential to understand the universe, to harness this power, it's too important. Rhys, who had been observing the exchange with a troubled expression, finally spoke up. Amelia, maybe Dreyfus is right. We've seen what this knowledge can do. We're risking everything, not just our lives, but countless others. Vance's eyes were wild, her face flushed with a mixture of excitement and desperation. You don't understand. This is our chance to learn, to grow. We can't let fear control us. Mira stepped forward, her voice steady despite the fear she felt. We need to think about the consequences of our actions. Knowledge is powerful, but it comes with a responsibility. If we proceed, we need to be prepared for the fallout. The room fell into a tense silence. Each member of the team was grappling with their own internal struggles. Vance's obsession with the pursuit of knowledge was pushing her to consider completing the puzzle at any cost. Dreyfus, grappling with the weight of leadership, was trying to distance himself emotionally from Vance's increasingly reckless behavior. Rhys, newly awakened to the fragility of life and the importance of his role, was struggling with his own desire for survival. Mira, the emotional core of the group, was torn between supporting Vance and heeding the cautionary advice of Dreyfus and Rhys. The chamber's atmosphere grew heavier, the alien technology thrumming with a sense of impending doom. The walls seemed to close in, the inscriptions glowing with a menacing light. The final decision lay before them, each choice fraught with potential consequences that could reverberate across the galaxy. As the team gathered their equipment and prepared to leave the chamber, the gravity of their situation weighed heavily on them. The path forward was shrouded in uncertainty, their choices defining not only their fate, but potentially the fate of countless others. Vance, her mind racing, clutched the third key tightly. The allure of the knowledge it promised was overwhelming. But so was the sense of impending danger. She knew that whatever decision they made would be irreversible, shaping the future of their mission, and perhaps the future of humanity itself. Dreyfus, his leadership and resolve tested like never before, prepared to guide the team through the perilous path ahead. The burden of making the right choice was immense, and the cost of failure was unimaginable. Rhys, finding a renewed sense of purpose, stood ready to support the team in whatever way he could. The trials had transformed him, and he was determined to face whatever came next with a clear sense of his role. Mira, the emotional anchor, took a deep breath, preparing to navigate the complex dynamics of the team. Her empathy and strength were crucial in holding the group together as they faced the moral and existential questions that lay ahead. The corridors of the alien ruin seemed to stretch endlessly, their walls adorned with shifting glyphs that cast an unsettling glow. The atmosphere was thick with the weight of unspoken tension, each member of the team grappling with the consequences of their choices. The once united front they presented had begun to crack under the pressure of their conflicting motivations. Dr. Amelia Vance strode through the ruin with a single-minded intensity. Her gaze was fixed ahead, her thoughts consumed by the puzzle's enigmatic finality. Her grip on the crystalline key was tight, knuckles whitening as if the physical hold could tether her to her obsessive quest. Every so often, she would pause to consult the alien inscriptions, her eyes darting back and forth, searching for meaning in the chaotic dance of light and shadow on the walls. Captain Dreyfus, trailing behind her, was a figure of visible frustration. His face was etched with lines of strain, and his normally calm demeanor was fraying at the edges. He had hoped that their discovery would unite them in purpose, but instead, it had driven a wedge between them. The weight of leadership had grown heavier with each step, and his attempts to reassert control were met with resistance. "Amelia, we need to discuss our next move." Dreyfus's voice was clipped, edged with an urgency that belied his calm exterior. "We're not equipped to handle the fallout of this discovery. You're risking everything." Vance barely acknowledged him, her focus unwavering. "We're so close, Elias. You have to understand. This knowledge could change everything. We can't turn back now." The walls seemed to pulse with Vance's words, the alien glyphs resonating with her fervor. Her obsession had taken on a life of its own, and the team felt the strain of her single-minded pursuit. The atmosphere was charged with a growing sense of dread, each step echoing the fracturing of their unity. Sergeant Lucas Rhys, walking with a deliberate pace, was increasingly supportive of Dreyfus. His recent trials had given him a clearer sense of purpose. He glanced at Vance with a mixture of concern and resolve. The darkness of the alien ruin seemed to mirror the turmoil within him. "Captain, if we keep pushing forward without a plan, we're endangering everyone," Rhys spoke, his voice steady but carrying a weight of conviction. "We need to think about the consequences." Vance's reaction was a sharp glance over her shoulder, her eyes flashing with a mix of irritation and desperation. "And what? Retreat to the safety of ignorance? You saw what this technology could do. We have to push forward." Mira, trailing behind the group, was caught between the opposing forces. Her eyes were red-rimmed from lack of sleep, and her hands trembled slightly as she carried the team's equipment. Her once clear vision of their mission had become clouded by the increasing discord among her team members. She felt the sting of abandonment, the sense that her place within the group was slipping away. "Amelia, please," Mira's voice cracked, her usual composure faltering. "We can't do this without each other. We need to decide together." Vance's face softened for a moment, but the intensity of her obsession quickly hardened her resolve. "I can't stop now, Mira. We're on the brink of something monumental. You don't understand what's at stake." The tension in the group was palpable. Vance's isolation grew more pronounced with every step she took deeper into the ruin. The rest of the team began to question her judgment, and the fractures in their unity became more apparent. The weight of their decisions was bearing down on them, and the responsibility for the outcome seemed to be shifting. Dreyfus tried to maintain control, but his authority was increasingly challenged. His voice, once a steady source of guidance, now carried a note of desperation. If we continue down this path, we risk everything, not just our lives, but the safety of the galaxy. We need to think clearly. Vance's response was a stony silence, her mind racing ahead to the next clue, the next revelation. Her actions, driven by an almost manic desire to unlock the puzzle's secrets, were isolating her from the rest of the team. Her interactions were becoming more curt, her focus so consumed by the puzzle that she was no longer fully present with her team. The team reached a new chamber, its architecture more elaborate than before. The walls were covered in intricate patterns that seemed to shift as if in response to their presence. The center of the room held a complex mechanism that Vance approached with a single-minded determination. Her fingers moved deftly over the controls, her breath quickening with excitement. Dreyfus stepped forward, his frustration evident. "Amelia, this is not just about you. It's about us. We need to make decisions that ensure everyone's safety." Vance's eyes met his, and for a moment, the raw intensity of her obsession was visible. "Safety? What we're doing here is bigger than any of us. It's about the future of our species. I can't stop now." Rhys, seeing the growing divide, placed a hand on Dreyfus's shoulder. "Captain, we need to come up with a plan. We can't keep following Amelia blindly. We need to take a step back and reassess." Mira, feeling the weight of the group's fracturing dynamics, spoke softly, her voice filled with a mixture of fear and resolve. "We need to remember why we started this mission. We were a team. We have to find a way to work together, or this mission will tear us apart." As the team worked through the mechanism, the atmosphere in the chamber was thick with tension. Each member was lost in their own thoughts, their actions reflecting the internal conflicts that had surfaced. The air was charged with unspoken fears, hopes, and the burden of responsibility. The mechanism, finally activated by Vance's relentless pursuit, began to shift, revealing another piece of the puzzle. The rooms changed, casting eerie shadows that seemed to dance with the light. The revelation of the next piece did little to alleviate the tension. Instead, it deepened the rift between Vance and the rest of the team. As they left the chamber, the path ahead was unclear. The team was fractured, each member grappling with their own doubts and fears. Vance's obsession had pushed her to the brink, and the unity that once held the team together was now a distant memory. The consequences of their choices were looming large, and the future of their mission, and perhaps the galaxy itself, hung in the balance. The chamber was colossal, its architecture reflecting the grandeur of the ancient creators. The final piece of the puzzle lay at its heart, a crystalline construct of swirling energies and intricate designs that seemed to pulse with a life of its own. The team stood at the threshold, their collective breath held in anticipation of the culmination of their quest. Dr. Amelia Vance's eyes widened as she stepped into the chamber, her gaze locking onto the final piece. The mechanism, a complex lattice of glowing lines and rotating facets, seemed to resonate with her very being. The triumphant expression on her face was at odds with the somber atmosphere that enveloped the room. "Here it is," Vance said, her voice a mix of awe and exultation. Her fingers reached out to touch the mechanism, but her movements were deliberate, almost reverent. "The culmination of everything we've worked for." Captain Elias Dreyfus's eyes, once filled with a resolve to lead, were now clouded with concern. He observed Vance's reverence with a growing sense of unease. The implications of the mechanism's power were too great, and the potential consequences of unlocking it weighed heavily on him. "We need to consider what this means," Dreyfus said, his voice steady but tinged with worry. "What we're looking at could change everything. We need to make sure we understand its implications fully before proceeding." Sergeant Lucas Rhys, who had grown into a stabilizing force within the team, was positioned near Dreyfus, his gaze fixed on Vance. The inner conflict that had plagued him seemed to have crystallized into a firm resolve. He stepped forward, placing a hand on Vance's shoulder. "Amelia, have you really thought this through? What if activating this mechanism leads to consequences we can't even begin to foresee?" Vance's reaction was a mixture of irritation and determination. "We've come too far to turn back now. This is our chance to redefine the very fabric of existence. We can't ignore what's at stake. Mira Singh, standing apart from the main exchange, watched the unfolding tension with a heavy heart. Her role as the emotional anchor had become increasingly challenging as the team's internal struggles intensified. She stepped between Vance and the mechanism, her voice soft yet firm. "Amelia, we're all aware of the potential this holds, but what about the ethics of wielding such power?" Mira's eyes searched Vance's face, looking for any sign of reconsideration. "We need to think about the greater good, not just our personal ambitions." The mechanism before them seemed almost alive, its components shifting in response to their conversation. The glowing lines intertwined like threads of destiny, hinting at the power it possessed. Each member of the team felt the weight of its potential, the gravity of the choices they faced. Vance's hand hovered over the control panel, her fingers trembling with a mixture of excitement and uncertainty. "We're on the brink of a breakthrough. This could be humanity's chance to reshape our future." Dreyfus stepped closer, his voice carrying a note of desperation. "But at what cost? We don't fully understand what this mechanism is capable of. Are we prepared to shoulder that responsibility?" The room was filled with a tense silence, each member of the team grappling with their own thoughts and fears. The chamber's ambient light flickered, casting eerie shadows that danced along the walls. The mechanism's hum grew louder, a constant reminder of the power that lay within their grasp. Rhys, whose journey from darkness to light had been marked by intense personal struggles, spoke with a sense of moral clarity. "The power to alter the universe is not something to be taken lightly. We need to consider the implications for all of existence, not just ourselves." Vance's eyes met his, and for a moment, her triumphant facade wavered. The gravity of their situation was becoming increasingly clear, and the ethical dilemma of wielding such power weighed heavily on her. Her fingers clenched into fists, her mind racing with conflicting thoughts. Mira, feeling the strain of the group's fractured unity, took a deep breath. "We need to make a decision that reflects our values, not just our desires. This is about more than just us, it's about the entire galaxy." The chamber seemed to close in around them, the walls contracting as if to emphasize the enormity of their decision. The final key, a symbol of both ultimate knowledge and potentially catastrophic power, stood at the center of their struggle. Vance's hand hovered over the mechanism, her breath coming in shallow gasps. The pulsating light from the key cast shifting patterns across her face, highlighting the conflict within her. She glanced at her team, her eyes searching for support, understanding, or perhaps a sign that she was making the right choice. Dreyfus stepped back, his face a mask of conflicted emotions. "We need to make this decision together. We can't let our personal ambitions cloud our judgment." As the team faced the final decision, the chamber's energy intensified, resonating with their collective tension. The mechanism, an embodiment of the alien creator's ultimate plan, awaited their choice. The stakes had never been higher, and the path they chose would determine not only their own fates, but the future of countless lives. The ship's interior was bathed in a harsh, unnatural light as the ancient mechanisms began their unsettling activation. The energy pulses rippled through the ship's hull, distorting the space around them, creating an eerie dance of shadows and distorted echoes. The crew, now a fractured reflection of their former unity, felt the weight of their choices pressing down on them. Dr. Amelia Vance stood at the edge of the control room, her eyes fixed on the viewscreen. The cosmic phenomena unfolding before her were a cruel twist of irony, a testament to her relentless pursuit of knowledge. The stars outside seemed to shift and shudder, as though reacting to the activation of the puzzle. The once stable expanse of space was now a turbulent sea of fractured light and unpredictable distortions. Each pulse of energy from the puzzle sent a shudder through the ship, making the walls tremble and the lights flicker. "Amelia, we need to do something." Captain Elias Dreyfus's voice cut through the chaos, his tone urgent. He moved to her side, his face etched with concern. "This is beyond what we anticipated. The whole system is destabilizing." Vance's gaze remained fixed on the viewscreen, where the stars appeared to writhe like living entities, as if the universe itself was being torn apart. It's too late now, Elias. We've set something in motion that can't be undone. The mechanism. It's rewriting the fundamental laws of space and time. Dreyfus's eyes narrowed. We don't know that for sure. We need to try something, anything, to stop this before it's too late. Vance turned to him, her face a mask of exhaustion and regret. You don't understand. I've seen the calculations, the projections. It's not just a mechanism, it's a force of creation and destruction, something beyond our control. Sergeant Lucas Rhys stepped forward, his face pale but resolute. We're all responsible for this. We all wanted to know what it was, what it could do. Now we have to face the consequences. Mira Singh, standing by the console, her fingers moving over the controls with practiced precision, looked up with a pained expression. We need to find a way to mitigate the damage. There must be a way to reverse the activation, to contain the energy. As the team struggled to come to terms with the enormity of their situation, the ship shook violently, throwing everyone off balance. The lights flickered erratically, casting long, jagged shadows across the walls. The floor beneath them felt like it was shifting, warping with each pulse of energy. Dreyfus grabbed Vance's arm, forcing her to face him. Amelia, we can't just stand here. We need to find a solution, and we need to find it now. Vance's eyes were hollow, her passion and drive replaced by a deep sense of regret. I don't know if there is a solution. We've activated something that's beyond our understanding, something that could unravel the fabric of reality itself. Rhys's voice was steady despite the chaos around them. We can't give up. There has to be a way to control it, to limit the damage. Mira nodded, her determination shining through her fear. Let's focus on the controls. There might be a way to shut it down, or at least contain the effects. As the team worked together, the tension between them grew palpable. Vance's internal struggle was visible in her every movement. Her hands trembled as she tried to decipher the alien controls, her mind racing with thoughts of what had gone wrong. Dreyfus's leadership was put to the test as he tried to coordinate their efforts, his commands sharp and precise, but his face betrayed his own anxiety. Rhys, driven by a newfound sense of purpose, did everything he could to support Dreyfus, while Mira's technical expertise became crucial in their attempt to salvage the situation. The ship's systems groaned under the strain of the destabilizing forces. The energy pulses continued to disrupt their attempts to regain control, causing the screens to flicker and the ship's systems to malfunction. Each moment brought new challenges, as the crew struggled to keep up with the rapidly changing conditions. In a quiet corner of the control room, Vance's face was a study in conflict. Her eyes were filled with a deep, haunting regret as she looked at the viewscreen, where the universe was in turmoil. Her obsession had led them to this point, and now she had to face the consequences of her actions. The weight of her choices pressed down on her, and she felt the crushing realization that her pursuit of knowledge had come at an unimaginable cost. Dreyfus, watching Vance closely, saw the anguish in her eyes. He knew that she was grappling with more than just the physical consequences of their actions. Her internal struggle was mirrored in the external chaos, and he felt a pang of sympathy for her. We need to stay focused, Dreyfus said firmly, his voice cutting through the tension. We have to find a way to contain the effects and prevent further damage. As the team continued to work, their efforts were punctuated by moments of quiet reflection and introspection. The gravity of their situation was heavy, and each member of the crew was forced to confront their own feelings of guilt, regret, and fear. Mira and Rhys, fighting side by side, found solace in each other's presence. Their bond had deepened throughout the crisis, and their shared struggle forged a connection that was both comforting and empowering. As they worked together, their mutual support became a beacon of hope amidst the chaos. The ship continued to shudder and quake, but the crew's determination remained unwavering. They worked with a sense of urgency, knowing that the fate of not just their own lives, but the entire galaxy was at stake. Their struggle was both a physical and emotional battle, as they fought to repair the damage and find a way to restore stability. In the midst of the turmoil, Vance's mind was a storm of conflicting emotions. Her obsession had led them to this point, and now she faced the stark reality of her choices. The once clear path of discovery had become a labyrinth of regret and uncertainty. As she worked alongside her team, she felt a profound sense of loss, not just for the knowledge she had sought, but for the lives that were now at risk. The intensity of the situation forced each member of the team to confront their own demons and make difficult decisions. The stakes were higher than ever, and the team's ability to work together and find a solution was put to the ultimate test. The ship was a crucible of tension, each vibration a harsh reminder of the chaos that had unfurled across the galaxy. The energy from the activated puzzle pulsed through space like a malign heartbeat, sending ripples through the cosmic fabric. Stars that once shone brightly were now smudged by dark tendrils of disruption, their lights swallowed by the encroaching void. Dr. Amelia Vance stood apart from her team, her figure silhouetted against the tumultuous backdrop of distorted space. Her hands, once so sure in their quest for knowledge, now trembled as they rested at her sides. The pride and resolve that had once marked her were gone, replaced by a hollow recognition of the enormity of their actions. The very thing she had sought ultimate understanding had become a harbinger of destruction. Captain Dreyfus approached her cautiously. His eyes, usually sharp with determination, now bore the marks of exhaustion and resolve. The sight of Vance, so diminished and defeated, struck him deeply. He knew the weight of their choices was more than any one person could bear. The fate of the galaxy now rested in their hands, and their choices would define not just their own futures, but the future of countless others. "Amelia," Dreyfus began, his voice steady but filled with gravity, "we have to make a decision. The energy from the puzzle is spreading too quickly. We need to choose whether to destroy it and sacrifice all we've worked for, or risk letting this chaos consume everything." Vance's eyes, sunken and weary, met his with a look of resignation. "I've led us into this mess. I thought I could control it, but now, it's too late. I can't undo what's been done." She turned to face the swirling maelstrom of stars beyond the viewport, her voice barely a whisper. "I've become the architect of my own ruin." Sergeant Lucas Rhys, standing by the control console, watched the stars flicker ominously. His hands gripped the edge of the console, knuckles white with the strain of the moment. He was the silent observer of the tension between Dreyfus and Vance, his own internal battles reflected in the turmoil outside. "We need to act now," he said, his voice steady despite the turmoil within. "The energy is destabilizing the galaxy at an accelerating rate. We have to decide whether to destroy the puzzle or find a way to contain the damage." Mira, once a technician overshadowed by the mission's grand scope, now stood as a pillar of strength and clarity. Her face, set with determination, reflected a hard-earned wisdom. The strain of the past events had transformed her from a support role into a critical decision-maker. "If we destroy the puzzle," Mira said, her voice resolute, "we lose the chance to understand what we've uncovered. But if we don't, we risk everything." Dreyfus looked at Mira, his expression one of complex emotion. He had always valued her perspective, but the stakes were now unbearably high. "Mira, what do you suggest we do?" Mira took a deep breath, her eyes darting between the distorted space outside and the faces of her team. "There's no easy answer here. We're at a crossroads where every option comes with a heavy price. To destroy the puzzle means sacrificing the knowledge it holds. To keep it means potentially annihilating countless lives. We must weigh our choices with the gravity they deserve." Vance, despite her emotional and physical exhaustion, managed to find a semblance of clarity. "The knowledge has cost us more than we can afford. Perhaps it's time we let go of our pursuit and focus on what really matters, survival." As the crew deliberated, the ship's alarms blared, signaling a new escalation. The puzzle's energy surged violently, causing the vessel to shudder and the stars outside to warp further. The sense of urgency was palpable, each moment marked by the growing threat of imminent destruction. In the midst of the chaos, Dreyfus's leadership was tested like never before. His voice rang out with an authority forged in the fires of their shared struggle. "We need to act now. Lucas, prepare to initiate the destruct sequence. Mira, assist him with the calculations. Amelia, I need you to make the final call. You're the one who knows this puzzle better than anyone." Vance's heart weighed heavily with the burden of their choices. She nodded slowly, her mind racing through the implications of their decision. "Initiate the sequence," she said with a quiet but firm resolve. "Let's end this." As Rhys and Mira worked in tandem, the ship's systems began the countdown for the puzzle's destruction. The atmosphere was tense, charged with a heavy realization of what was about to unfold. Each character, grappling with their own emotional weight, moved with a sense of purpose that bordered on desperation. The final moments were a poignant blend of action and reflection. The ship's control room, now a battleground of conflicting emotions and desperate decisions, was the focal point of their collective struggle. The energy pulses from the puzzle grew erratic, their intensity a stark reminder of the cosmic stakes involved. Dreyfus looked at Vance, seeing in her eyes a mix of relief and profound regret. He understood that her sacrifice was more than just relinquishing her pursuit of knowledge, it was a surrender to the larger forces at play, a recognition of the limits of human ambition. As the countdown reached its final seconds, Mira stepped forward, her face set with determination. "We've done all we can. The rest is up to fate." The ship's systems completed the sequence, and the puzzle's energy was met with a final, resounding burst. The energy ripples dissipated, leaving behind a fading echo of their actions. The stars outside began to stabilize, their once turbulent light gradually returning to its natural state. In the aftermath of their decision, the crew was left to grapple with the consequences of their choices. The galaxy, though spared from immediate destruction, bore the marks of their actions. The cost of their pursuit of truth had been immense, and the weight of their decisions would linger in their minds for years to come. As the ship drifted in the now stable expanse of space, the crew members found solace in their shared survival. The bonds between them, though tested and strained, had been forged in the crucible of their struggle. The finality of their decision marked both an end and a new beginning, a moment of reflection and renewal. The once stable space outside had become a swirling maelstrom of distorted stars and rippling cosmic energy. Each shudder and jolt of the vessel was a testament to the cataclysmic power they had unwittingly unleashed. The ship's walls, usually sturdy and reassuring, now felt like thin barriers against the cosmic forces threatening to tear them apart. Inside the control room, the atmosphere was thick with tension. The team was on the brink of making a decision that would alter the course of history. Dr. Amelia Vance stood apart from the group, her usually composed demeanor now a stark contrast to the turmoil she felt inside. Her fingers, once deftly manipulating alien artifacts, now clung weakly to the edge of a console, her eyes hollow with a mixture of awe and dread. Captain Dreyfus, with his characteristic leadership demeanor tempered by exhaustion, had taken control of the situation. He moved with purpose, his every action a reflection of the heavy responsibility resting on his shoulders. His face was etched with deep lines of worry as he monitored the escalating energy readings. The ship's instruments were lighting up with warnings, each beep and flash a reminder of the impending doom. Sergeant Lucas Rhys, his once confident posture now marked by fatigue, worked at the control console, his focus unyielding despite the chaos outside. His actions were methodical, each keystroke a calculated effort to stabilize the ship and mitigate the damage. The knowledge that their choices could lead to the destruction of entire star systems weighed heavily on him. His determination to see this through to the end was a reflection of his own journey from despair to purpose. Mira, who had become a pillar of emotional support for the crew, stood close to Vance, her gaze shifting between the disheveled scientist and the flickering displays. Her earlier trepidation had been replaced by a steely resolve. The trials they had faced had forged her into a leader in her own right, and now she grappled with the weight of their final decision. "Amelia," Dreyfus's voice cut through the tense silence, his tone firm yet empathetic. "We need a final decision. The energy is destabilizing too quickly. We need to either destroy the puzzle and forfeit our chance at ultimate knowledge or risk letting this chaos spiral out of control. Vance's gaze was fixed on the viewport, where the distorted stars flickered erratically. The grandeur of the universe, once a source of inspiration, now seemed like a cruel mockery of their ambitions. She had spent years chasing this elusive knowledge, only to find herself at the precipice of cosmic destruction. The realization of her own hubris was a bitter pill to swallow. "I thought I could control it," she murmured, almost to herself. "I believed that with enough knowledge, we could master the universe. But now—" Dreyfus approached her, his hand resting gently on her shoulder. "Amelia, we're not here to dwell on the past. We need to make a choice now. What's done is done. We can't change what's happened, but we can decide how to move forward." Vance's eyes, once vibrant with intellectual curiosity, now reflected a deep-seated regret. Her shoulders slumped, the weight of her choices pressing down on her. Maybe we've gone too far. Maybe the pursuit of knowledge has blinded us to the true cost of our actions. Rhys, his gaze never leaving the control panel, interjected with a hint of urgency. "The puzzle's energy is causing more than just cosmic disturbances. It's disrupting gravitational fields and causing localized black holes to form. We're running out of time." Mira stepped forward, her voice steady despite the tumult around them. "There's no easy choice here. Destroying the puzzle means we lose everything we've worked for. But letting it remain means risking the lives of countless beings across the galaxy. We need to consider every option carefully." Dreyfus nodded, his expression one of grim determination. "We have to act decisively. If we choose to destroy the puzzle, we need to be prepared for the consequences. The technology is complex, and we might not be able to undo the damage entirely. But if we let it continue, the galaxy could be irrevocably altered." As the crew members grappled with their decision, the ship shuddered once more, and the alarms blared with renewed intensity. The energy readings were spiking, and the stars outside seemed to pulse with an ominous rhythm. The sense of urgency was palpable, each passing moment adding to the gravity of their decision. Dreyfus's voice, steady and commanding, cut through the din. "Lucas, start the destruct sequence. Mira, assist him with the calculations. Amelia, this is your final call. You've been at the forefront of this discovery. What's your decision?" Vance, her face a mask of resignation and resolve, met Dreyfus's gaze with a newfound clarity. "Destroy it," she said quietly but firmly. "We can't afford to let this knowledge be our undoing. Let's end this before it's too late." The crew moved with a sense of urgency, each action a testament to their shared resolve. Rhys and Mira worked together with a precision born of their earlier trials, inputting the necessary commands and setting the ship's systems to initiate the destruction sequence. The control room was a flurry of activity, every keystroke and adjustment a crucial step in averting disaster. As the countdown began, the ship's systems emitted a low, mournful hum. The energy from the puzzle, once a source of unbridled ambition, was now being dismantled. The process was complex and fraught with risks, but the crew remained focused on their goal. In the final moments, Vance, Dreyfus, Rhys, and Mira stood together, their faces reflecting a mix of determination and melancholy. The tension was almost tangible, a shared understanding of the gravity of their actions binding them together. The countdown reached its final seconds, and the energy pulses from the puzzle began to wane. Outside the viewport, the stars gradually returned to their normal state, their light piercing through the once distorted darkness. The ship's alarms fell silent, replaced by a profound stillness that enveloped the vessel. The cosmic chaos that had threatened to engulf the galaxy was slowly being replaced by a tentative calm. Dreyfus looked at his team, his expression one of deep relief and sorrow. The decision they had made was not without cost, and the weight of their choices would linger long after the immediate crisis had passed. "We did what we had to do," he said quietly. "The galaxy is safe, but at a great price. We have to live with the consequences of our actions." Mira nodded, her eyes reflecting the pain and hope that marked their journey. We've learned a hard lesson about the cost of knowledge and the price of ambition. The path we chose wasn't easy, but it was necessary. Vance, standing apart from the group, felt the full weight of her actions settling in. The pursuit of knowledge had led her to a place of profound regret, but she also felt a sense of closure. "I thought I could control the forces we were dealing with," she said softly. "But sometimes the quest for understanding blinds us to the dangers we're creating." Rhys, his gaze fixed on the now stable expanse of space, turned to his comrades with a sense of renewed purpose. "We faced a challenge that tested us all, but we made it through. Now, we have to rebuild and find a way to make amends for the consequences of our choices." As the ship's systems began the countdown sequence, the crew gathered in a silent, almost reverent anticipation. The normally bustling control room was now subdued, every individual acutely aware of the gravity of their actions. The screens that once displayed the chaotic energy fluctuations now displayed a steady decline, each tick of the countdown echoing with the promise of a new chapter, one that was both a relief and a burden. Vance's mind raced, her thoughts a storm of conflicting emotions. She had spent so much of her life immersed in the pursuit of knowledge, believing that understanding the universe's deepest secrets was the path to enlightenment. Yet now, faced with the reality of what that pursuit had wrought, the clarity she once had seemed an elusive ghost, the realization of her own fallibility was a bitter pill, and it was clear that the cost of truth was far more than she had ever imagined. The moments leading up to the destruction sequence were heavy with a profound silence, broken only by the low hum of the ship's engines and the occasional beep of the countdown timer. Each sound seemed magnified, a reminder of the fragile balance between order and chaos that hung in the balance. As the final seconds approached, the crew's breaths were held collectively, their focus unwavering despite the emotional weight of their decision. Captain Dreyfus, with his hands steady on the control panel, looked around at his team. His gaze was a mixture of respect and sorrow. His leadership had been tested in ways he never anticipated, and the responsibility of guiding his team through such an unprecedented crisis had taken a toll. His usual composure was now tinged with a somber reflection of the choices they had made and the path they had chosen. "In the end, it's not just about making decisions," he said, his voice low and resolute. "It's about living with the consequences." Rhys, positioned at the control console, felt the weight of the responsibility he had taken on. His actions had transitioned from desperate survival to a measured determination. He had embraced his role with a sense of purpose that was both refreshing and grounding. The destructive sequence they were initiating was his final act of defiance against the cosmic forces they had unleashed. As the countdown neared zero, his thoughts were a mix of relief and profound sadness. The galaxy was safe, but the personal cost was undeniable. "Sometimes," he said quietly, "the price of safety is much higher than we ever imagined." Mira's role had evolved significantly over the course of their journey. From a supportive figure to a crucial decision-maker, her growth was evident in every choice she made. Her understanding of sacrifice and responsibility had deepened, and now, as the ship prepared to dismantle the puzzle's destructive power, she found herself confronting her own fears. Her relationship with Rhys had become a source of strength, their bond forged in the crucible of their shared trials. As she watched the countdown tick away, her thoughts were on the personal sacrifices she had made and the future they would now have to navigate. "We've come so far," she said, her voice laced with a mixture of hope and melancholy. "But the journey doesn't end here." The final moments before the puzzle's destruction were a tableau of quiet determination and reflective sorrow. The energy pulses from the alien artifact had diminished, but the residual effects on the galaxy were still being assessed. The ship's instruments, once a chaotic blur of warnings and alerts, were now showing signs of stabilization. The cosmos outside, once a swirling tempest, had begun to settle, the stars reclaiming their familiar positions in the vast expanse of space. As the countdown reached its final seconds, the energy field around the puzzle began to collapse. The ship's systems emitted a series of final, resonant tones, signaling the completion of the destruction sequence. The powerful artifact, which had been a beacon of limitless knowledge and potential, was now a dormant relic. The immense power it once held had been neutralized, its influence receding into the annals of history. Dreyfus took a deep breath, his shoulders sagging with a mix of relief and exhaustion. "We did it," he said softly, his eyes scanning the now calm displays. "The immediate threat is neutralized. The galaxy is safe for now." Vance, her face a mask of profound weariness, turned to her crew with a mixture of gratitude and regret. The pursuit of ultimate knowledge had led them to the brink of destruction, and the personal cost of their journey was clear. The weight of her actions was a burden she would carry for the rest of her life. "Thank you all," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "I'm sorry for everything. I thought I could control it. I thought that understanding the universe was worth any cost. But I see now that some knowledge is too dangerous to wield." Rhys's gaze, steady and resolute, met Vance's with a sense of quiet determination. "We all took part in this journey," he said. "We faced challenges that tested us in ways we never expected. The choices we made were difficult, but we faced them together. We need to learn from this experience and move forward." Mira stepped forward, her presence a calming influence amidst the emotional turbulence. Her eyes, reflecting a deep sense of understanding, met each of her crewmates in turn. "We've all changed through this ordeal," she said gently. "We've learned about the cost of ambition and the importance of responsibility. Our journey has revealed more than just the secrets of the universe. It's shown us the true nature of our own limits and capabilities." The ship continued its journey through the now stable expanse of space, each member of the crew processing the aftermath of their decisions. The galaxy was recovering from the disruption, the cosmic order gradually reasserting itself. The ship's systems were returning to normal, but the impact of their actions would be felt for a long time to come. As they looked out into the tranquil expanse, the crew knew that their journey was far from over. The lessons they had learned and the scars they carried would shape their future endeavors. The galaxy was healing, but the echoes of their choices would resonate throughout the cosmos. Captain Dreyfus gathered his team for a final meeting, his tone reflecting both resolution and a deep sense of shared experience. "We've faced challenges that tested our very souls," he said. "We've made choices that will affect countless lives. But through it all, we've learned the true cost of our pursuits and the weight of our responsibilities. The universe is vast and mysterious, but it's our actions and decisions that define our place within it." Vance, now a shadow of her former self, but with a newfound humility, nodded in agreement. "I set out to unlock the secrets of the universe," she said. "But in the process, I've learned that some knowledge is too great a burden to bear. The pursuit of truth comes with its own price, and sometimes the greatest lesson is understanding the limits of our own ambition." Rhys and Mira, standing together with a sense of unity, shared a final, heartfelt glance. Their journey had forged a bond that would remain unbreakable, a testament to their shared experiences and the trials they had faced together. The stars outside seemed to shine with a renewed clarity, a symbol of the hope and determination that had guided them through their darkest moments. As the ship continued its voyage, the crew looked forward to the future with a sense of cautious optimism. The galaxy was a place of wonder and danger, and their experiences had only deepened their appreciation for its mysteries. The final key had been uncovered, and with it, the profound realization of the true cost of their quest for ultimate knowledge. The ship drifted in the silent void, the remnants of the once mighty puzzle, now a scattered collection of inert debris. The aftermath of their actions was a tableau of muted colors and slow-motion recovery. The galaxy was marked by an undeniable change, its once chaotic energy now a subdued hum, as if the very fabric of space had sighed in relief. The crew, battered but alive, gathered in the quiet aftermath, their faces etched with the weariness of their monumental journey. Captain Dreyfus stood at the ship's observation deck, staring out into the vast expanse. The stars, once shimmering with ominous foreboding, now sparkled with a gentle, serene light. They were a reminder of the resilience of the universe, and the small, fragile place humanity held within it. His gaze was steady, reflecting a profound sense of both accomplishment and loss. The galaxy had been spared from immediate destruction, but the cost had been steep, and the echoes of their actions would ripple through time. Vance, once the driving force behind the quest for ultimate knowledge, now moved with a measured, almost fragile grace. The pursuit of the puzzle had consumed her, but in its wake, she had found a new sense of purpose, one grounded in humility and acceptance. As she walked through the corridors of the ship, her footsteps were lighter, each step a testament to her journey from obsession to understanding. She paused at a viewport, the remnants of the puzzle still visible as distant, broken shards, now powerless. Her reflection in the glass was a quiet acknowledgement of the personal transformation she had undergone. "Knowledge is a double-edged sword," she whispered to herself, her voice barely audible. "It can, but it can also destroy." Rhys, whose actions had shifted from mere survival to leadership, now took on the role of a guiding force for the crew. The trials he had faced had forged him into a figure of strength and resilience. His interactions with the crew were marked by a newfound clarity and determination. The burden of the past weighed heavily on him, but he approached it with a sense of purpose. In the crew's common area, he gathered his thoughts before addressing the team. "We've been through a crucible," he said, his voice firm yet compassionate. "Our journey has changed us, but it has also given us a chance to shape the future. We must honor the lessons we've learned and use them to guide us forward." Mira's presence was a poignant reminder of the sacrifices made. The loss she felt was a deep, personal wound, but her role had been instrumental in their survival. She moved among her crewmates with a quiet dignity, her emotions a complex blend of sorrow and pride. Her conversations were reflective, often turning to the shared experiences and the future that lay ahead. She spent time in the ship's garden, tending to the plants with a gentle touch. The growth around her mirrored her own sense of renewal and the enduring impact of her sacrifice. "Every choice we make echoes through time," she mused as she pruned a delicate vine. "We've left our mark, and now we must find meaning in what comes next." The galaxy itself seemed to hold its breath, the vast expanse now a canvas of potential and uncertainty. The remnants of the puzzle's power were a reminder of the delicate balance between knowledge and responsibility. The ship's sensors recorded the subtle shifts in cosmic energy, evidence of the lingering effects of their actions. The energy fields, once turbulent, had calmed, but the traces of their impact were undeniable. The crew gathered in the ship's briefing room for a final meeting. The table, once a hub of intense strategic discussions, now served as a place for reflection and planning. Dreyfus, Vance, Rhys, and Mira sat around it, each lost in their thoughts, but united by their shared experiences. The room was filled with a sense of quiet determination and a deep understanding of the journey they had undertaken. Dreyfus opened the meeting with a thoughtful gaze. "We've faced an extraordinary challenge," he began. "Our actions have altered the course of history, and now we must navigate the consequences. The galaxy is changed, and so are we. We have a responsibility to ensure that our experiences guide us toward a future that honors the sacrifices made." Vance nodded in agreement, her voice carrying a tone of solemn reflection. "We sought knowledge and faced its darkest facets," she said. "In the process, we learned that understanding comes with a price. Our actions have reshaped the universe, and we must be mindful of how we use our newfound wisdom." Rhys added his perspective, his voice steady and resolute. "The path we've walked has tested us in ways we couldn't have anticipated," he said. "But through it all, we've found strength in each other and in ourselves. Our journey has given us a unique perspective, and we must use it to guide our future endeavors." Mira, her voice tinged with both sorrow and hope, concluded the meeting. "We've faced the cost of our choices," she said. "Now we must look to the future and find meaning in the echoes of our actions. The galaxy is vast and full of possibilities, and it's up to us to chart a course that honors the legacy of what we've been through." As the meeting concluded, the crew dispersed to their respective duties, each member carrying the weight of their journey and the promise of a new beginning. The ship continued its voyage, moving through the galaxy with a renewed sense of purpose. The stars outside the viewport seemed to shine with a gentle, hopeful light, a symbol of the possibilities that lay ahead. The crew had faced the ultimate test, and emerged with a deeper understanding of themselves and the universe. The galaxy, though forever changed, was now a place of new beginnings and potential. As they sailed through the cosmos, the echoes of their actions reverberated through space, a testament to the complexity of their journey and the profound impact of their choices. The galaxy was a canvas of endless possibilities, and the crew's story was a reminder of the delicate balance between knowledge and responsibility. The final words of their journey were a reflection on the nature of existence and the meaning of their experiences. In the vast expanse of space, amidst the remnants of their actions, they found a sense of closure and a renewed commitment to shaping a future that honored the lessons learned. The echoes of the past would guide them, but the future remained a blank slate, waiting to be written by those who dared to explore its mysteries.